Good evening, Tanse Anine. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Ontario's Special Investigations Unit is taking action after a November 2022 incident that left a 61-year-old Métis man with injuries. John Semmerling filed a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario. And as APTN's Leanne Sanders tells us, that complaint is leading to consequences.
The Ontario Special Investigations Unit has charged Thunder Bay Police Constable Ryan Doherty with assault causing bodily harm after a complaint was filed with the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. John Semmerling filed the complaint earlier this year. Now that Doherty has been charged, Semmerling hopes it will make a difference with the Thunder Bay Police Service.
I wish that maybe the whole force learns from it. Because it's not something that should be taken lightly.
According to his lawyer, Chantel Bryson's complaint to the tribunal, one of Semmerling's friends had called Thunder Bay Police to check on his well-being on the evening of November 8, 2022. Semmerling said when police arrived, he went willingly with them to a local hospital. After a long wait without ever seeing a doctor, Semmerling started walking home. Also, according to Bryson's complaint, 4 city police officers then pulled up in cruisers, and one of them assaulted Semmerling.
When he came to see me, he was visibly bruised, he had concussion symptoms.
In an emailed statement, the Thunder Bay Police Service said, "We're unable to offer comment while the matter is before the courts. The officer is on non-frontline administrative duties." Constable Doherty is scheduled to appear in a Thunder Bay court on May 23rd. Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
In the Yukon, the practice of placing apprehended children in care of foster homes or group homes is on the decline. That's thanks to child welfare reforms in recent years. And as APTN's Sarah Connors explains, more children are being placed with their extended families. Here's that.
For Indigenous children in care, being disconnected from their families and culture can follow them throughout their lives. But in the Yukon, a new report found there's been a 137% increase in children being placed with their extended families. That's due to a positive shift between the Yukon government and the Council of Yukon First Nations in child welfare.
The relationship is a lot stronger. Case planning with placement of children, cultural connections is now entrenched and is a principle of the legislation.
For Family and Children's Services, the key was to bring all 14 First Nations in the territory to the table when it came to reforming the Child and Family Services Act.
I think it was a process that we did together where we were able to work through some really tough discussions and get supports for children and families that they needed.
According to the report, 61% of children in out-of-home care were under extended family care agreements in 2022. As over 90% of children in care in the Yukon are Indigenous, KCS says keeping children with their family leads to better outcomes.
Any family that walks through Child and Family Services engages in a traumatic experience. At least they know I'm at grandma's, or I'm at auntie's, or I'm at the neighbors that I've spent a majority of my time with.
Around 80 children in the territory remain under the director's care. Chambers says current legislation centers on protection, while a shift worldwide focuses on prevention.
We're not going to see the outcomes of child protection and child welfare improve without, addressing poverty, without addressing homelessness, without addressing housing, and without addressing substance misuse.
While both parties agree there's still a long road ahead, they say the ultimate goal is to improve outcomes for children, youth, and families who are involved in the child welfare system. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Well, it was a special day for Senator Michelle Audette in Ottawa. On Wednesday, she was gifted with the 4 millionth pin for the Mooside campaign for her work on ending violence against Indigenous women and children. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
After receiving the pen, Senator Michelle Odette took the time to talk about how she got involved with the campaign after meeting its founders, the Lacerte family, years ago.
So when I saw your dad with this initiative many moons ago, I said, that's it. Men are part of the solution. And I will embrace that until my last breath.
And she called upon all men to play an active role in ending this violence.
Be an ally. Protect us. Protect me. Protect your daughter. Protect your partner. Be the one that will say, Nokum Evelyn used to say, we lost our role in our territory.
Raven Lacerte is one of the co-founders of the Moose Hide campaign. She explained the significance behind the pins.
The moose hide represents a little piece of medicine from the land. It's iconically Canadian. And we thought that maybe it was something that could help to honor that healthy warrior spirit, in particularly in our men, but in all of us, and something that people could wear as a community of people that are standing up against violence towards women and children.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller was also on hand for the presentation. He said one of the most significant things the campaign does is spark important conversations.
And sometimes those conversations are ones that are very difficult, and they present themselves with the certainty and the confidence of a closed mind. And if those conversations result even in the smallest words like, or I'm not sure about that, but you've made me think, there's a measurable success.
The Moose Hide campaign officially began in British Columbia in 2011, and Lacerte said with each passing year it continues to grow.
To see the growth over the years and to see Canadians really taking the pin and wearing it as an everyday commitment is such an honor to be able to be part of some really important matter of change that our country so desperately needs.
Moose Hide Campaign Day will take place on May 11th this year. Organizers are asking Canadians to join a fast from sunrise to sunset on that day. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Well, we want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen so far tonight. Here's how to continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca, or you can leave us a comment on our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. 10 First Nations in Treaty 9 territory have launched a huge lawsuit against the governments of Canada and Ontario over resource extraction and broken treaty promises. The $95 billion lawsuit was announced today, and it's asking the court to find laws related to resource extraction are not valid on their territories. Attawapiskat, Niskandiga, and Fort Albany First Nations, along with others, are seeking to bar governments from making future decisions on how their land is being used. The move could jeopardize mining in Northern Ontario, especially in the controversial Ring of Fire region. Kate Kempton is a senior counsel at Woodward and Company, the law firm filing the suit.
And so what we are saying in this case is we're stepping right out of that box of unilateral jurisdiction and saying that is not correct. It never was. That Treaty 9 actually guaranteed and promised co-jurisdiction. So this is really a case about who the governments are and who makes what decisions.
All right, we have to pause our news for a moment, but still ahead, First Nations in BC are calling for more involvement in the marijuana industry.
We have inherent rights that existed before the arrival of Europeans to develop our own economies and to use our lands and territories as we wished and as we wish. And then we've also got that strengthened by UNDRIP.
Welcome back to APTN National News. A coalition of First Nation groups in British Columbia is calling for changes to how cannabis legislation works. They believe they should have a say in how pot is bought and sold within their territories and who benefits. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
The First Nations Leadership Council represents 203 First Nations. They say they have inherent rights to oversee, process, sell, and consume cannabis within their territories. But 5 years after legalization, Canada and BC are not recognizing that jurisdiction in their current cannabis legislation. Hugh Breaker of First Nations Summit says there's a division in the cannabis industry.
There are those who work within the provincial and federal rules. In other words, it's the regulated cannabis industry. And then there's the unregulated cannabis industry. It includes a lot of First Nations who feel that Canada and British Columbia do not recognize First Nation jurisdiction appropriately, or at all, actually. And so they work outside of the regulated industry.
The Leadership Council wants the feds and the province to align cannabis laws with the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. They are calling for changes that would allow band councils to have jurisdiction, revenue sharing, and taxation rights over cannabis sold within their boundaries.
We have inherent rights that existed before the arrival of Europeans to develop our own economies and to use our lands and territories as we wished. And then we've also got that strengthened by UNDRIP.
The council says these changes would allow First Nation communities to benefit from legalized cannabis. We contacted the provincial government for comment, but did not receive a response before airtime. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Well, it's Tourism Week across the country, and Indigenous Tourism Alberta is celebrating Indigenous-owned businesses. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Tim Patterson started Zuckman Guiding in early 2020, just as the COVID pandemic lockdowns were beginning. Not great timing, he admitted, but his business survived. He has partnered with 4 non-Indigenous tourism businesses to offer hiking, snowshoeing, and camping guides to favorite spots like Canmore, Banff, and Lake Louise. Their most popular are the Athabasca Glacier hikes, situated both in Jasper and Banff National Parks.
We just get them up to look at different glaciological features, such as mill wells. For the full day tour, we get to the back of the glacier to the ice fall where there's crevasses. And we just, on the way up, we talk about different features like the hoodoos and the mountains and the ice field and what we're seeing in terms of climate change on the ice.
The most visited glacier in North America is losing over 5 meters of ice every year. And Tim Patterson says he sees it.
It seems every time I go up, every couple of weeks it's changed. So, it's not just in terms of years, it's months and weeks and days, really. And even between morning and afternoon can be quite drastic in terms of how the water is flowing and how much.
Mackenzie Brown is the Director of Industry Development with Indigenous Tourism Alberta. She says businesses like Athabasca Glacier Ice Walks that work with Indigenous-owned businesses have gained new insights, and that improves the quality of their work.
So then they were able to partner with Tim, whose traditional lands from his ancestors is in that area. So he could provide that Indigenous perspective. So it just has completely changed the way that the experience is, because it's able to, really offer a brand new experience through an Indigenous lens.
After a slow start in 2020, Patterson says 2023 is looking good.
I already have 12 tours booked out and put up another, half dozen, and half of those are booked up. So it looks promising so far.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Well, sometimes we don't believe a story will happen until we see it. That's the case next week with a long-awaited human rights hearing for day school survivors in Burns Lake, British Columbia. APTN's Kathleen Martins will be attending the first week of the hearings. Hi, Kathleen. It seems we only talk about this story involving discrimination and the RCMP every few years, and the key word there being talk, yet it sounds like there could be some real action next week in northern BC, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to be back and tell you that something's going to happen on this story next week. I'll be going to cover for APTN and the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. They're going to be in Burns Lake, BC, which is many hours north of Vancouver, northern British Columbia, and they're going to hold their first hearing outside of their office in Ottawa.
Well, Kathleen, is this the usual way the tribunal works, by traveling to individual communities to hold these hearings?
Yeah, no, good question. No, this is the first ever time they're going to be outside their office in Ottawa. They were asked by the day school survivors who are going to be testifying in front of the tribunal if they could hold it in their own community. This way they don't have to make the many-kilometer trip to Ottawa. A lot of these survivors are older. Some have illnesses. As well, they wanted the whole community to be present, to provide support, and to hear their stories.
That's certainly some big news and important news, and it is good that they're going up there. So what will the survivors end up telling the tribunal, Kathleen?
Right, well, they filed this complaint, human rights complaint, in 2020, but this goes back to when they were children, 4, 5, 6 years old, attending day school, Immaculata Day School in Burns Lake. It's a First Nation. It was run by the Catholic Church. There was a priest, there were nuns, there were missionaries. They were forced to attend during the day. They went home after school, but they said they didn't talk to their parents about the abuse they suffered. They said they were physically abused at the school. What happened is they went forward probably around 2010, started talking about it, remembering it. This is historical stuff, so it doesn't always come up right away. They went to RCMP. They said, listen, we want to file a complaint of physical abuse about what happened to us at day school. RCMP said, okay, we'll investigate. They assigned an officer. According to the survivors, he botched the job. He didn't bring an interpreter. He wasn't trauma informed. And he certainly didn't seem to have a grasp on residential school, day school experiences. Because of that, they felt discriminated against as Indigenous people who did have to go to day school. And so they filed a human rights complaint. The Canadian Human Rights Commission agreed that there was discrimination. The RCMP could have done better. Also, what bothered the survivors, no criminal charges came out of this investigation. It was just closed. And they want to tell their stories. So the Human Rights Commission agreed, ordered the tribunal to hold a hearing and find. This happened in originally 2020. Now we're going to be 2023, and this is supposed to take place next week in Burns Lake.
Well, this is such an important story, Kathleen. Thanks so much for this, and we'll certainly be watching this as it unfolds.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, it's time to step aside one final time. We'll have highlights from today's laughter-filled In Focus coming up. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Parksville, British Columbia. This was the nighttime sky along the beach as Raquel Baptiste walked with coworkers in town for some training. Raquel called the view heavenly, and we certainly have to agree with that. That's a great view, Raquel. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We begin on the East Coast at 2 degrees in St. John's and 12 in Halifax. 3 degrees in Cartwright and 11 in Coujawak. 14 degrees in Quebec City and 11 in Val-d'Or. Clear and 13 in Toronto and 10 in North Bay. 4 degrees in Wawa and 7 in Sioux Lookout. -3 in Churchill and clear and 8 degrees in Norway House. 8 degrees in Barons River and 12 in Winnipeg. 12 in Regina and 14 in North Battleford. 8 degrees in Buffalo Narrows and 8 degrees in Stony Rapids. As we head west, 11 degrees in Fort Chipewyan and 13 in Peace River. 12 in Edmonton and 12 in Lethbridge. Clear and 16 in Vancouver and clear and 22 in Kamloops. 12 degrees in Smithers and 14 in Fort Nelson. 6 degrees in Beaver Creek and 0 in Old Crow. 11 degrees in Wrigley and 12 in Trout Lake. -3 in Fort McPherson and -2 in Colville Lake. Cambridge Bay is looking at -4 and Whale Cove is looking at -5. -9 in Arctic Bay and -1 in Iqaluit. Well, laughter is often the best medicine within Indigenous communities, so Indigenous humor was the topic on APTN In Focus this week. Here's a quick look at the show.
But I just remember the feeling of like being so nervous, and then once my first joke hit and people laughed, of just like feeling a calm and like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, is make people laugh.
Janelle, what's your favorite thing about doing comedy?
The validation I never got as a child. No, the best thing I love about stand-up comedy is making people laugh.
It's fun, it's real, it's true, and it's just like something we could all relate to. It's just life, you know?
Yeah.
And the class clown is the teacher, and the teacher is now a comic, eh?
As an Indigenous person with disabilities, why do you think it's important to have this representation out there?
To stop some stereotypes out there that disability people can't do this or that, but we like everyone else.
So how did you get started in comedy?
Where did it all begin?
Yeah, where did it all begin?
I was about 6 years old when I realized that I can get out of a spanking from my mom by making her laugh. So I was like, oh, this is some good stuff I got going on here. So around 8 years old, I saw my first stand-up comedian while I was watching one of the only 2 channels on the res with my mom, and I was like, what's that person doing? She's like, that's a stand-up comedian. I was like, I want to do that.
The man whose near-death experience led to a full-blown inquiry into so-called starlight tours by Saskatoon City Police has passed into the spirit world. Daryl Knight was from the Soto First Nation in Saskatchewan. In January 2000, he had just left a party in Saskatoon when he was scooped up by police and left near a secluded power station in -25-degree weather outside the city. His only outer garment, a denim jean jacket. He pounded on the door of the station and alerted a worker inside. Daryl spoke up about this and people listened. 2 men were found frozen dead near the same spot days later, and the mother of Neil Stonechild came forward saying her son died the same way a decade earlier. Knight's complaint exposed starlight tours and led to the Stonechild inquiry. Daryl Knight died on April the 2nd. He was 56 years old. And our condolences go out to the family and those that knew him. All right, that's all we have this Wednesday of APTN National News. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskamatin. Have a great night.